varsam.
오빤 강남스타일 강남스타일 낮에는 따사로운 인간적인 여자 커피 한 잔에 여유를 아는 품격 있는 여자 밤이 오면 심장이 뜨거워지는 여자 그런 반전 있는 여자 너는 선어해 낮에는 너만큼 따사로운 그런 선어해 커피 식기도 전에 원샷 때리는 선어해 밤이 오면 심장이 터져버리는 선어해 그런 선어해 아름다워 사랑스러워 그래 너 hey. 그래 바로 너 hey. 아름다워 사랑스러워 그래 너 hey. 그래 바로 너 hey. 지금부터 갈 때까지 가볼까 오빤 강남스타일 강남스타일 오빤 강남스타일 강남스타일 오빤 강남스타일 에이 섹시 레이디 오빤 강남스타일 에이 섹시 레이디 성숙해 보이지만 놀 땐 노는 여자 이때다 싶으면
We good? So I heard there was some Gungam style out here. Where's the Gungam guy at? I want a picture with Gungam guy. Come back up here, Gungam guy. That's too awesome. And I need a clicker. Thanks. Hell, I don't know. One of them down there. Dude, someone get a magnificent picture of this. This is sweet. Yeah, somebody, first one that emails me 10 points. First one's got a high quality, high res picture of this. Who can do it? Who can do it first? It's all a competition.
I think that guy just won.
I don't know. You got to take it and send it. She's going for the gusto. Yeah, oh, right there. That's awesome, man. Nice costume. Where are you going to be dancing at tonight? This is it? You just showed up to World Regions class and mysteriously that song was playing? That's magnificent. That's as it should be. Oh, that's okay. Hey, how's everybody doing tonight? Happy Halloween! How would you guys like to do the costume thing? You want to do it first or you want to do it after class? We originally were supposed to have a fire drill. There's not going to be a fire drill, so if for any reason fire alarms go off, that shit's real, all right? Just, it's not a drill if it happens. So if you want to do it first, did anybody vote for first? Yeah. All right. Let's, I guess, just get everybody on stage who wants to be seen in a costume contest. We can do a quick judging of the costumes. And I'd like to get a pick of each of you individually, but let's wait for the picks till after class, because that might be a little more time-consuming. Everybody who's in the audience gets to vote on best costume. Holy crap, it's like the whole audience. The entire audience is dressed. This is hilarious. Yeah, you guys got to tighten it up, Oh my dear Lord. You might have to go too deep. You're going to have to go too...
Oh no.
Do you guys have a group? Oh my God, there's a group? Oh dear Lord, all right. Are you supposed to be Stalin?
No.
Putin?
The Soviet Union?
Just the Soviet Union in general?
Yep.
Awesome. All right, I guess we're gonna have to do this in 2 rounds. I had no idea there'd be this much school spirit going on here. You guys just chill, whoever's on the outskirts. You know what? We can do it all. Everybody line up. Just go up the aisle up there. Keep going up the aisle. Up against the wall. Up against the wall. Is that cool? All right. Do we have a spotted favorite for those in the crowd? Do we see a favorite already? Russia? Did someone say penis? Is there a penis up here? What? I see Jesus. Is there a Jesus? I see Jesus. All right. All right. Russia, you take one step back. You take one step back. Jesus, you come on stage and take one step back. You guys get in the back. Who else do I want to hear? I think the Avengers as a unit, right? Yes. All right, you guys take one step back. You guys take one step back. Who else do we like over here? Pikachu? Where's Pikachu? All right, we got to have Pikachu up here.
Ask me about my wiener.
Do you guys want Wiener? You want Wiener? All right, Wiener takes one step back. I kind of got to have Robin. I have to have Robin one step back. All right. Let's go now this way. The chicken. Let me hear for the chicken. All right, chicken, take one step back. What are you supposed to be?
Alan from The Hangover.
Alan from The Hangover? And you're supposed to be Katy Perry, all right? What? Okay. All right, you take one step back. You take one step back. Who else do we got over here that we need? That guy? All right, that guy. We get you all the way back. Bane? Where's Bane? All right, Bane. Bane and this other dude, you guys go to the back. All right? Anybody else over here you want for final round? Ass man? There's an ass man? All right, take one step back, ass man. Are you Gandhi over there? Just, in fact, you're not even in this class, you just wandered in, all right? All right, anybody else we want to take from either Gungan style? You go to the back row. Indiana Jones, you want Indiana Jones? Okay, Indy, take one step back. Obamacare? Oh, no. All right, Obamacare, come up. All right. Are you Bain as well? Bain Capital. Oh, that's good. You got to come up. All right. Okay, we good? Thank you to all the second round people. Second rounds can sit down. Everybody else that's still up here, okay? Everybody else didn't get picked. I like you, Spock. I love all of you. You all did a great job. Thanks for coming up. Now we're down to second round now. Second round, we should be able to see everybody. Yes. Yeah, sure. Okay. So, Bain Capital. That's good. All right, now can everybody in the room see everybody up here? I'm going to go through each person one at a time, and you applaud and scream if you want them to make it to the final round. You ready? Robin, the girl wonder. It's okay. The living wiener.
That's cool.
That's okay. Pikachu. You guys are a unit, right? All Avengers step forward. All Avengers. Okay. All right, you guys step back. Gungan style. Okay. Let's see. I think you guys and you step forward. Jesus. All right, you step forward. Indiana Jones. It's okay. It's the whip. It scares them. Mother Russia.
Come on.
Oh, he's getting boos. This isn't the WWF, all right? It's just a costume contest. Bain Capital. That one's close. It's close. Obamacare. Okay, Obamacare steps forward. The Funky Chicken. Who is this again? Master who? Master Bates? Master, all right, Master. Master, this guy. All right, you step forward. Bane. All right, Bane. Who are you again?
Captain Falcon.
Captain Falcon.
Yeah, so you lose.
Ass Man. And?
Sorry I was late, but I was my ex's period.
Oh. I think that says it all. Let's get a round of applause for the people who just got cut. All right, everybody who's not stepped forward can go. Nicely played, all of you. Final round, Death Match 2000, World Regions, Halloween style. This is tough now. This is tough. Let's separate you guys a little bit. So Avengers crew, come down a little bit. All right, go down. Yeah, space up, space up, space up. There can only be one winner. There can only be one winner. All right, so mull them all over. Mull them all over. Now you have to vote again. Actually, we'll pull out the top three. We'll pull out the top three. Avengers. Gangnam Style. It's about the same. Jesus Christ. Mother Russia. Oh. Obamacare. This guy. I still don't even know who the hell it is. But what the hell's Halo? Oh, Jesus. Okay. Bane. Captain Falcon. Really? Captain Falcon? All right. I think we have to, a Captain Falcon, the Halo guy, Jesus, Gungam, and Avengers. We're going to have to do one more with these three. You guys step forward. You all step forward if I just named you. All right. Final round, only clap once. Only clap once for one of these characters. Are you ready to play? Are you ready to play? The Avengers! Gungam Style. Jesus! All right, so far Jesus is in the lead. This dude. Captain Falcon. I think we clearly have a winner. Captain Falcon is your World Regions winner. But if I could, after class, are you guys going to stay the whole class? Can I get a picture with all of you? Or are you going to stay for the whole class? You guys are not even in this class. That's what I figured. All right, so let's go over here. I got to get into the middle of the Avengers. All right, you guys can stay right where you are. Just stand right there. Group shot it right there. You guys, she's going to take it right here. And if anybody else is leaving, let me get my pic with you right now. Okay, if anybody's a person who's not even in this class, and are you guys staying for class or are you leaving? You're staying? Staying? Cool. You're staying? Okay, let me get all your pics after class then. Now, let me tell you, here's the age discrepancy between me and you guys. I have no freaking idea who those people are and they won. That's hilarious. So who is Captain Falcon? Super Smash Brothers. Hero. A Nintendo game. Well, see, I'm old enough to know Nintendo, but I didn't know that character. I would have been impressed if somebody was Mrs. Pac-Man, all right? As far as back as I go, though. All right, thanks for participating, and we'll have to throw out some sort of bonus to everybody by the end of the class, one way or the other. No, don't worry, Katie. It's not going to be a current event thing. Or oh, that's okay. As we get going here in class today, do we have anything, any questions, any comments, any concerns about last class? Deal with Taiwan. I think we got through Taiwan. Did we get through Taiwan last class? Yeah. And we got through Tibet as well. This is an old one. This isn't even the one. Really? Yeah, there it is. Thing 5, China's back, bitches. That's where I thought I left off. Yeah, that's not the most current, but it's fine. Any questions? Anything going on in the news, current events? Anything you want to discuss before we get going? Yes?
Civil war is erupting again in Syria.
Yeah. They were supposed to have a ceasefire, and the ceasefire lasted 5 minutes, and that's why we haven't been talking much about Syria, because it's a full-on civil war. There is nothing new. The only reports you're going to hear out of Syria are increased casualty reports. No breakthroughs. No side is winning, and so it's just going to continue to grind human death counts for the rest of the semester, very likely. If there's something that happens in Syria that's of significance, it's going to be a game changer, we will talk about it in class, but I haven't seen anything in the last year that leads me to believe that anything is going to happen besides more human suffering and misery there for a little bit. Yes, Waldo. Waleed. What the hell is that? I didn't. They're late, I guess. I don't know. Oh no, there's another superhero escaping. Again, don't know what the hell that was. Let's keep it that way. All right. That kind of shit happens to me all the time. All right, Wally, what was your comment? No, I'm just your professor, but I wanted to dress up like you guys, so this is just a costume. I have no real superpowers, although I have the superpower of alcohol absorption that I'm going to test after this class. Superpower! Sycamore? What's at Sycamore? Sycamore Deli? You guys drink at Sycamore Deli? That is hilarious. That's awesome. I will try to make it to Sycamore Deli then. Into the basement. It's like a pit now, right? $2 pitchers. Awesome. I'm sure you'll buy me one for free, or buy me one for $2 and give it to me for free, which would be highly illegal, so let's do that. All right, anything else? Anything else going on in the news or questions about class? Yes? Yes, there's supposed to be a Star Wars Episode 7, but it is assuredly not global news. You did hear that Disney bought out Lucasfilm. Yeah, that's pretty hilarious. I want to be George Lucas and spend my entire career building up some magnificent thing to then destroy right before I die. So, to each his own. I just hope that Jar Jar Binks and Mickey Mouse have a lightsaber duel in which both of them die. That is an Episode 7 I can rally behind, all right? And I will pay a lot of money to see that. Anything else going on? Any current events that actually have something to do with this class? Anything? Anything once? Anything twice? How are the flash quizzes for Japan going for you so far? You want some more of those? Yes? Yeah! Bring it! There'll be one on Thursday, another one on Friday. You want some more for the rest of the semester too? Yes! Do it! We'll keep pouring on the heat with flash quizzes. I was waiting to do a flash quiz on the China lecture. Hopefully we'll get through it tonight, and then we'll have some flash quizzes on the China lecture. And through your voting, you have decided that Russia will be the next region we start covering as soon as we get out of China. Which will be good because you'll have to be on stage with me. If we get to Russia today, then you're on stage with me the rest of the time waving the Soviet hammer and sickle, all right? Is that cool? That's the order of events. So we'll finish off, you'll do the Japan flash quizzes for the rest of this week. We'll kick into some China flash quizzes next week and some Russia flash quizzes the week after that, and we'll see where it goes from there. Capiche with everyone? Are you guys actually going out partying tonight? Is it? It's like freezing outside. Is there going to be some serious trick-or-treat action? Well, I will have some trick-or-treat action here on stage for those of you that make it through the lecture. I've got something you can come up on stage and trick-or-treat on the way out. Do what? David Cameron lost a primary election vote? There wasn't an election in Great Britain right this second. Oh, you have to email me that story. I didn't know that there was any sort of regional election. Okay, send me that story. He hasn't lost his position, but maybe they had some of their representatives lose some local elections, which may be changing the equation of who controls the parliament. I had not heard that, though. Anything else? Okay, I know it's Halloween and people are in funny costumes, which always makes things even funnier. But the last couple classes, we have been getting reports that people in the audience are so loud that people can't hear me on stage, which is strange because there's not that many of us in here anymore. So do try to keep side conversations to a minimum. And if you're asked to be quiet or leave, please do so. All right, let's get back to the lecture then if no one's got anything else going on. Once, twice, yes. What's that? China has a new stealth fighter? Oh, let's make that an exam question. China has a new stealth fighter. Can you send me the story on that? Cool. What are the details? It is like, what's it the American equivalent of? F-22. So China has now released, is it like a public release? They put it in the showroom and they're saying, here's our new stealth fighter? It's what? It's equivalent to F-35, not F-22. Okay. But did China release it publicly? They're like, here's our new cool plane? No? Oh, so this has been leaked. Oh, okay, cool. So China has a new stealth fighter, the equivalent of the F-35, right? Right? That maybe not has been officially disclosed, but everybody knows these things, even if it's not official. All right, cool. How big is China's Air Force, by the way? You guys know? I have no idea. I'm asking, I'm crowdsourcing here. Certainly, no offense to my Chinese friends, but certainly it's not the equivalent of the U.S. Air Force yet, but I'm wondering. I don't know. I would assume that the Ruskies and the Americans probably have the most potent air forces still, but I don't know that for certain. Yeah, I saw a hand go up. Well, 5 or 10 years is a long time, especially for Chinese history. Well, actually, it's not for Chinese history since they got 5,000 years history, but when you're starting to talk about China in today's world and you say, oh, well, China did this 10 years ago, that's like saying China did this 1,000 years ago. They have come so far so quickly in the last decade. So, yeah, I know the collision you're talking about that happened with some Chinese jets, but 5 or 10 years ago is a lifetime away for where their technology is right now. All right? Any other comments on Chinese military? Cool. I don't know where that came from, but that's awesome. But we're talking about China, so it's all par for the course because to finish off our China lecture, and I'm for certain that we will get to it today since we've done 2 lectures on it already, China is back, bitches. That's what I was getting at. The kind of culmination of this whole lecture is even though we in the West have never really thought about China, China's never been on our brain for the last couple hundred years. And we've kind of marginalized it and dissed it. And quite frankly, it's been entirely appropriate. 50 years ago, nobody cared about China. They were no significant power, even in their region. They certainly were not a global power. They weren't even a major center of trade at that point 50 years ago. And they weren't a military threat of any kind. That was then. This is now. And to restate something I said probably 10 times in the last 2 lectures, don't think about it in terms of, oh, China is going to be a world power. Think of it as China is returning to its world power status. For virtually all of China's history, they have been a world power. Take any year on average for the last 2,000 years, and if you went around and polled anybody on planet Earth and said, what is the major country? What is the major power? China would be in the top 3, if not the top 1. It's only been in this last 200 years of the period of humiliation that we talked about that China kind of went away. Right? So it's not a culmination of power, it's a return to power. Something I will continue to stress on exam questions. Okay, well, how is it that they're back? Because I didn't want to just leave it at that and say, well, China really sucked for a couple hundred years, and we talked about that for an hour or 2, and now they're rich, so end of lecture. No. I think if you want to understand today's China and today's world, of which China is a major part, you do have to understand that the rebuilding process was not instantaneous. It did take a little while. And so I'm going to pluck out a few things out of modern Chinese history now that I do want you to know to understand the people better, understand their position better, understand that the struggle didn't just end when they became a united communist nation in 1949. It actually got a little bit worse for a while. For the 1950s and 1960s, they did this intentional program called the Great Leap Forward. Master Mao was in charge, Mao Zedong, leader of the Communist Party, leader of the country. There was a tremendous amount of national pride after 1949. simply because they had stood back up, simply because the country was reunited again, simply because they had a functioning government, for goodness sakes, that actually had a collective military again. So everybody was really proud, and in that spirit, that kind of, yes, we're getting our shit back together again. All the people in China, and at this point they may have had closing in on 1 billion people, maybe more like 800 million or 900 million people. All of these people participated in this grand kind of communist experiment. And something called the Great Leap Forward was a program by the commies, the government, that said, hey, let's catch up. Let's catch up. We are so far behind. We have squandered the last 200 years, and our technology is way behind. Our industry is way behind. We are so far behind the rest of the world. Let's collectively, as a unit, all work together and catch up. If you don't remember anything else about the Great Leap Forward, it was an attempt to catch up. So what you had is massive industrialization. Remember, under a communist system, the government controls everything. So the government controls all the economy, all the money, all the businesses, all the resources, all the coal, all the land, all the agriculture. They control everything. We don't like that system personally, but in a situation that China found itself in 1949, it wasn't such a bad deal, because the government that controls everything can move the levers of power around very quickly to make things happen fast. Now, before I get ahead of myself too much, let me jump ahead for a second and say, the Great Leap Forward was this grand move by the government to move all the levers of the economy and organize everything to get them back on track. It failed miserably, but I want you to, as a side note, put this in your brain and in your notes. A lot of folks around the world right this second are actually envious of China's communist government, if you want to call it that. We in the West don't like it because we say, oh, we're about freedoms and choice and electing your government and debate and public policy, and all of that's great, because I'm a fan of that stuff myself. But there are people around the world and countries around the world that say, you know, all that shit that the U.S. does is nice. All that public debate and elections, all that's quaint. But you know what? Their government doesn't really get stuff done very well, does it? It's not very streamlined, is it? When you have to debate about every law and every policy, there's people who want this and people who want that and people who want the other, and democracy's messy and it's clunky, isn't it? And you can't just say, which we do all the time in our country, why can't the government just do this? Everybody wants this. Why can't our government just do it? We can't. We're a democracy. And so a lot of countries on planet Earth right now today are looking at China going, oh, I wish we could do that. Because tomorrow, China's government could wake up and say, we're going to raise the taxes 50% on everybody. And that's it. There's no debate. There's no law that has to get passed. That's it. Tomorrow, China's government can wake up and say, we're going to build the largest dam on planet Earth and flood 1/4 of our country. And that's it. There's no EPA study. There's no public debate. There's no vote. That's it. They can do that. And there is something appealing about having a government that has that much power that can just get shit done. Okay? Again, I'm telling you this is more of a modern era phenomena that countries are right this second around the world are debating this, saying, yeah, democracy's cool and all, but man, we can't get shit done. Sometimes having a centralized government looks really appealing. Again, I'm not making a pitch for this. I'm not saying we should turn commie, because we're not going to, and I don't want us to. But going back to this now, it was appealing to everybody in China. It was like, oh yeah, we have lived through 200 years of disorder. Let's just have one entity, the government, just tell us what the freak to do, and let's do it. Let's get this policy on. So all 700, 800, 900 million Chinese people were actually pretty fired up and rallied around the government to enact these programs where the government took over all the land and said, okay, you people will grow rice here, and you people will grow corn here, and you'll do this, and we're going to organize the labor, and we're actually going to build these factories over here and these factories over here, and you people will move over here and work in these factories. Now, again, this is a model that for us, we'd say, that doesn't look right, doesn't sound right, but it was kind of effective up front. By the way, this is the communist model. This is the Ruskies model. The Ruskies invented this. It's called a command economy. You can jot that down. A command economy. The government commands and controls the economy. All of it. What will get made, what will get grown, what will get built, and how it will get moved around. So you people will grow the food that will feed us all. You people will build the tractors and cars that drive us all. You people will work for the government. You people will be in research division. They tell everybody and organize what's going to happen. Okay? Does that make sense? In this scenario, a government can make things happen very quickly. And they did. Very quickly, agricultural production started to jump up in China. And factories did jump up, and people got employed. And everybody was kind of pretty happy, proud of their country again. But it ultimately crashed and burned. And the reasons for it crashing and burning are multiple. It's one of the reasons why communism doesn't work really anywhere. And I won't get into a whole lecture about communism right this second. But part of the reason that it crashed and burned, I do want you to know this reason. Let me say this on the side. Communism kind of breeds ineffectivity and stagnation because people just get into their job. There's no impetus to do better. There's no impetus to work harder because you're going to earn the same amount of money no matter what. There's no impetus to innovate. And people actually do get greedy and start hoarding things to have a little more for themselves. So you had all that happening. That's natural. But here's the thing I want you to note about the Chinese experiment with this. Part of the reason the Great Leap Forward failed was because everybody was so damn optimistic. The Chinese people were so optimistic and so happy and so proud that they actually started lying to themselves. And so every year they'd say, okay, how much corn did we grow this year? 10 million pounds of corn? Awesome. Well, we can use that corn to feed these people and these people and these people. All right. And next year, even though the corn production had gone down, people didn't want to admit it. And they're like, we made 15 million pounds of corn. And the central government was like, oh, great. Well, then we can feed even more people and do this. And how much steel did your factory make this year? Well, we actually only made 2 million pounds. 10 million pounds. We made it. All right, cool. We can use the corn and the steel and all these things. And everybody up the scale of command kept lying to each other because nobody wanted it to fail. And that can only be perpetrated for so long before eventually everybody says, where's all the corn? Where's all the steel you people said you had? And the whole thing kind of crashed and burned. And this coincided in the 60s with a bunch of bad growing years. So what happened was the system kind of collapsed, and there were several years of mass starvation. Perhaps millions of people died under these policies. It's one of the reasons why if you hear people, usually not Chinese people, but if you hear Western scholars talk about Mao, some Western scholars, not all, some Western scholars will say that Mao was an asshole, and he was evil, and he was perpetrating genocide. I didn't even know this. I didn't know how hardcore some people's attitude was. And I'm like, but he was like the leader of his country. I mean, I know he had some failed policies, but some analysts say, no, the policies were so bad, and they were his fault, that it was his fault that perhaps 10 or 20 million Chinese people died. It's like, yeah, that is kind of bad. So again, I'm not saying I have that personal opinion. I don't. I think it was a failed policy that Mao had. He was trying to do good for his country, but it didn't work. But do know, you'll read some things, read books, maybe even have professors who say, yeah, Mao is like one of the worst humans in 20th century history because so many people suffered under those policies. Does that make sense? Okay? Again, I don't think the average Chinese person thinks that. They still see him as kind of a George Washington of the country. But these policies that they enacted, again, with a great amount of national spirit and a great amount of participation, initially, they just didn't work. And it didn't help things in the bigger picture. Okay? But millions died anyway. And you can find, just go Google a Chinese propaganda poster. You can find millions, not millions, but thousands of these beautiful pieces of art, these kind of Go China propaganda pieces that were put out in the 50s and 60s. Go Team China. Go Commie China. Communism's awesome. We're all going to collectively work together and make a great country. It makes for great PR. It's fantastic. But it didn't work out so well in reality. So you had the Great Leap Forward in the 50s and 60s, and millions of people actually die. However, that's not the end of the suffering, because in an attempt to kind of re-rally the Chinese people behind communism, you also had something that we call the Cultural Revolution from 1966 to 69. As these Great Leap Forward policies started to fail, obviously people became disillusioned with Mao, became disillusioned with the government. perhaps disillusioned with communism. So in a great propaganda campaign to get people rallied again, they did something called the Cultural Revolution. Mao himself was actually losing political power at the time, so he had enough of a fan base. Essentially, he kind of went out and Twittered and Facebooked in 1966 and said, hey, doesn't everybody love me? Then come support my cause. And he had enough followers who said, yes, I'll retweet you, Mao. Physically, back in the day, instead of retweeting, they actually would take to the streets and do shit. But we live in a different era now, all right? So instead of liking his Facebook post and retweeting him, people actually went out into the streets and carried around something called Mao's Little Red Book. Has anybody ever seen or heard reference to that? A little booklet of his sayings and how he thought life should be and how you should be a good Chinese person. And everybody carried these. It was almost like a cult. In fact, it kind of was a cult. That everybody, especially young people, your age, college-age people, who believed in the revolution, that communism was going to save their country. Come on, China strong, let's do this. Those are the people who really rallied to this cause. And the Cultural Revolution caused widespread economic and social upheaval all across China as well. You don't have to do rich, but that's fine if you want to, okay? So all that is going on as well. The Cultural Revolution, I do want you to note this as well. One of the main things that Mao was pushing for this was to reestablish his own power, for one, but in doing so, purge out all foreign influence. So for Mao, he thought, you know why communism's not working? Foreigners, foreign influence, people trying to make us capitalist, people who might want to try to make us democratic, but also these same people that helped destroy China for 200 years. So let's purge out Western influence. And in this light, you may have seen the Cultural Revolution depicted in movies. I know a dozen movies that depict the Cultural Revolution where they actually physically kicked out foreigners, ejected anybody who spoke English. Teachers who spoke English or taught English were persecuted or driven out of town. They burned all, say, like Western instruments, Western writings, Western books, bring them out into the center square and catch them on fire, and everybody dance around it and say, yay, purge the foreigners. So this is stuff that to you, you're like, what? That sounds freaky, and it kind of is. But it was one of these rallying kind of propaganda schemes. Communism, go, come on. Don't give up hope. Don't give up the revolution, just because we're suffering a little bit right now. Everybody hip to that? Any questions about that? Again, I know I was going to say, I know this, my Chinese friends are over here, so I don't want to offend any of them. What's up? You say it ended in 1976? That's true, because what happened in 1976? Chairman Mao died. So you could make the argument that this revolution continued from 1966 all the way to 76. But by 69, most of us say, by 1970, he had kind of been isolated out of politics. He was still there, but he really wasn't in charge anymore. Is that a fair assumption? Is that a fair thing to say? He wasn't in good health, but more importantly, he really wasn't in true power anymore. There were people that were working against him behind the scenes. And he did not have a firm grip on the whole wheel of the revolution by that point. By 1970s, he was kind of like the grandfatherly figure that everybody still respected and nobody could diss, but he really wasn't in charge, fully. And I'm glad you brought that up because that actually brings me to the next thing. I'm sorry, here's Chairman Meow. Sorry, I just love that one too much to not show you that one. That does bring up the next thing is that Mao does kick the bucket in 1976. And I'm so glad our Chinese friends brought up what they just did because I do want you to know, put it in your notes, even you online, that everybody so respected Mao, didn't respect communism so much, respected Mao so much for reuniting the country that everybody was afraid to openly throw him out of office or openly diss him, all right, or openly diss his policies. But everybody knew the policies weren't working. So there were other politicians, other Communist Party members who were working behind the scenes to try to enact other policies, who were trying to say, no, we need to stop the Great Leap Forward. Oh my gosh, this Cultural Revolution, this is a disaster for us. We can't even have any international diplomacy because we look like a bunch of assholes burning all this Western stuff. So there were other people behind the scenes who did not agree with Mao's policies. But here's the thing I wanted you to remember. None of them would vocalize that openly. Nobody wanted to piss off George Washington. Does that make sense? Again, I always try to relate it to what you know. It's like that once George Washington was president for the first 2 terms, let's pretend he really sucked. But he's George freaking Washington. No one in the original 13 colonies was going to diss George Washington. He helped found the damn country. Even if his policies sucked, no one's going to diss George Washington. That's what I want you to think of when you think of Mao. Now, also note this. There was another guy, and I do want you to know his name and face, Deng Xiaoping. Deng Xiaoping was one of those guys who behind the scenes was saying, I don't like these policies. These policies are not cool. Right? He wasn't saying Mao was uncool. He was saying these policies don't work. He was a big economics guy. In fact, and again, not to piss off my Chinese friends, but if you wanted to look at China's success today, and this feels like a test question, if you want to know who's really responsible for China's economic success right now, it's this dude, not Mao. Because Deng, behind the scenes, was actually fighting for a more capitalist approach. And he had said, even when he was in office right beside Mao during the revolution, he was saying, China's never been communist. We've been an imperial power, politically, but we've been as capitalist as it gets. We openly trade with the whole world. We've been a center of free trade for 2,000 freaking years. What's this communist crap? The central government's never controlled the Chinese economy. And I think, I'm pretending I'm Deng, I think we should reopen up to the world and do what we do best, which is produce shit tons of stuff and let Chinese people work as hard as they want to work on their own businesses. Hey, that's capitalism. Okay? But again, to re-stress the point for the 3rd time, Deng couldn't say this openly while Mao was alive. In fact, when he tried, he got kicked out of the Communist Party for a while. And he might have even spent some time in prison. But he certainly was dissed for a while. They were like, no, you shut up and go away. No one wants to hear that right now, because Mao's here. Right? Until 1976. And when 1976 came along, Mao died. By the way, you should probably jot this down. It sounds trivial, but it's not. Another major leader in China had died. I'm not concerned that you know his name, but also a major earthquake had happened. Major earthquake. Now, why would I say that sounds trivial? To us, here in the Western world, we're like, oh, earthquake, whatever. Natural disaster. In Asia, and particularly in China, it's usually a bad omen. And so you had a whole bunch of bad omens that all lined up in 1976. This big earthquake, another leader died, then Mao died, and people are like, crap, that's a bad omen. Now here's the deal about bad omens in China. When bad omens keep cropping up like that, that usually means, in the Chinese mind, that it's time to change. The old system ain't working, and the omens are telling us that. Now, I'm simplifying. I apologize to my Chinese friends. I'm wildly simplifying here so that an American audience can understand this. But there is something to that. And enough people in 1976, once the old man died and all these bad omens cropped up, people were more conducive and open to change. People are like, yeah, Great Leap Forward, not so good. Cultural Revolution, not so great. Mao's dead, earthquake. Yeah, probably time for change. And change did happen. Not the Communist Party. Communist Party still large and in charge. They are still to this day. But Deng and others said it's time for economic reform. We can still have a Communist Party and pretend we're communist all you want. But we need to liberalize the economy. Open it up so people can do a little bit more on their own. Definitely open up to trade with the outside world. You think about it, in today's world, we think of China makes everything. China makes everything, doesn't it? Who does China not trade with? Who do they not trade with? Antarctica? Antarctica doesn't trade with nobody, all right? It's a bunch of damn penguins. In today's world, we assume China is a major export powerhouse of planet Earth, and they trade with everyone. Prior to these economic reforms, they did not. All right? They wanted to be kind of like North Korea, and they were going to be like all semi-isolationist and just take care of themselves and not deal with the outside world. And Deng was like, that's how we make our money. Let's get back on that bandwagon. So 1976, Deng and his crew take over the Communist Party and implement capitalist economic reform, and it starts to work very, very fast. And the transformation was then underway. Economically, but let me stress, not politically. The same politics are still in charge. The same politicians and political party and political structure is still 100% the same. That is, a very small group of people named the Communist Party hold all levers of power. All of them. All of them. There's no voting. Okay? The voting that does occur is people in the Communist Party. It is semi-representative, but let me tell you how. Gesundheit. It's not that there's just a couple thousand people who are communist hanging out in Beijing who stay in power permanently. They actually do have a political party called the Communist Party. Maybe this is a good number to jot down too. I think, and somebody can Google and correct me, but I think probably only about 2% of all the people in China are Communist Party members. It's really 2, maybe 3% of people in China are card-carrying, I'm a member of the Communist Party. But you can do the math. 2 or 3% of 1.5 billion is a few people. Okay? But you have to be a card-carrying commie in the party to hold office, and the people in your local vicinity, let's say we had a Blacksburg or Montgomery County commune. The communist people here in Blacksburg or Montgomery County would say, hey, we kind of vote for you. You're going to be our party member to go to Beijing. And everybody does that around the country. So you do have some kind of representation, if you want to call it that, but there's no voting. That representation does not come from the public. It just comes from the party. Make sense? Okay? Again, my Chinese friends can correct me at any given time. I know I look Chinese, but I did not grow up in China. All right? So bear with me. I only know from talking to lots of folks how this stuff works. Because of that, this great boom economically that started to happen in the late 1970s, and again, it doesn't happen overnight. When you're transforming an economy that has 1 billion people in it, it doesn't happen overnight. And they're still in a rebuilding process from the last 200 years. So their industry's getting on its feet. Then they start to privatize a little bit. They give incentives to businesses to do better. They let people take a little bit more charge of their economic fate, and people start working harder. But it doesn't happen overnight. The Chinese central government still does control many factories and, say, the highway systems and the train systems and all these other things. What has happened over the course of the last 3 or 4 decades is slowly, the Chinese government has allowed more and more businesses to become private. So they used to control all of the steel industry. And they let you own a steel mill, and then you can own a steel mill, and you can own a steel mill. But the central government may still control a couple of steel mills. That's been the case for virtually everything. Does that make sense to everybody? So more and more privatization has been occurring slowly. And the economy starts to pick up very, very, very quickly. Because under the communist system, everybody just gets what you need. Only what you need. So it sounds nice. It sounds idyllic. If I lived in a communist society, and this is what every single attempt at communism has tried to do, they said, hey, all you people, we're all going to work together. You guys grow food. You guys work in a factory. You guys are doctors. You guys are lawyers. You guys are teachers, whatever. And you don't get a salary. We just all share our shit. So the farmers grow the food, and they give it to all of us, and the doctors help the farmers when they're sick, and the people in the factories make cars that they give to all of us. That's kind of a pure communist system. Never works, but that's how it is in theory. Okay? So it's not... The government can't transition that overnight. And it is slowly that they say, you guys can do your own factories. Okay, you people can grow your own food. And in this system, what incentive do you have? And I'm going to ask you all personally, wake up your neighbor. If you were living in a communist country, how would you behave at work? What would your work ethic be in a country where you just get what you need? You get free health care, you get free food, you maybe get a free car. But what's your work ethic when you go to work every day? You're going to make that money, but there ain't no money. You only get the corn you need. How hard are you going to work is my question. Walk in, clock out. Do you care if your factory is the best factory in the country? Do you care if your business is on the innovative cutting edge? Only if you're the boss and you get some sort of benefit or bonus. So that's usually why communism fails, because enough people like you, that is average people, say, why would I work hard? Why would I bust my ass? Why would I put in overtime at the steel mill? I'm going to get the same shit whether I work 1 hour or 101 hours. And so what happens overall in society is people kind of just hang out and do less, and they become stagnant. Innovation becomes stagnant. People don't work as hard. The businesses don't create as much. And you work that over a couple or a few decades, and you're like, why aren't people doing more? And it's like, why would they? Now, 1976 rolls around. Check this out. Wake up your neighbor for this. You all the same people. You're all Chinese factory workers. 1976, privatize. You guys can have a factory. You guys start a factory, and you guys can have a factory. Oh, and here's the deal. Work as hard as you want, because now you can sell your products. The more products you sell, the more you can make. The more you make, the more you can pay your workers. Who's going to work harder now? I think probably everybody would be like, oh, hell yeah. What? I can earn a shit ton of money? Harder I work, more money I can make? Game on, game on. Let's do this shit. I will now bust my ass again. So bottom line here is 1976, 1977, 78. By 1980, this engine that is the Chinese economy is just getting warmed up. People are starting to get fired up. Things are getting privatized. People are ready to work harder, and they do. Big time. And I always try to couch it in terms like this that are easy to understand. Let's just pretend all of you were making bricks out of mud. Just taking mud, shaping it into a rectangle, letting it dry. That's a brick. It's one brick. Let's pretend that every brick is worth $1. Under a communist system, doesn't matter. You don't get the buck. Nobody gives a shit. Make a couple bricks today, make a couple tomorrow, whatever. How many bricks are you going to make if you actually get to sell each brick for $1 and that buck goes in your pocket? How many more bricks do you think you'll make? Now let's couch it in terms of the Chinese population. If every single person in China in 1977 all made an extra 1 brick a day, just one more brick, how much money did they just make that one day? $1 billion. If everybody just did one more brick. But of course, they didn't just do one brick. They started their own businesses and shops and restaurants and grew more food and got innovative and tried to figure out how to do it better than their neighbor. That's what really launched the modern Chinese economy. That type of capitalist reform that unleashed that energy. Okay? But back to this slide. Not politically. They changed economically, not politically. The same 2% were still in charge politically of this country, and they remain so today. And these reforms started to make China so rich from the 1980s, not mega rich like we call them now, but enough people had enough more money during the 80s that people started to think, hey, our country's changing. We have a growing middle class. We're starting to look like other countries that have democracy, other countries that have different political systems. Our government in our country is changing. Maybe we're going to change to democracy too. And that's where you had the Tiananmen Square massacre happen. I think maybe I gave this to you in an earlier lecture, but let me give it to you again. One of the reasons why the Tiananmen Square massacre happened exactly in 1989, there were a couple different reasons. Can anybody name me why? Why 1989 did a bunch of Chinese people suddenly say, hey, we think we should have democracy? Hold on before you answer. For those of you who have no clue what the Tiananmen Square massacre is. A bunch of college students like you and some other folks from society started a pro-democracy rally in the Central Square in Beijing. Go democracy. We want democracy. And Deng Xiaoping, the guy in charge, and his military advisors said, clear these people out, use force if necessary, and hundreds of people were slaughtered. Okay? And it was international news, and everybody saw it and said, ooh, that's terrible, China's repressive, bad dictatorship. Okay? That's the short version. Why did it happen in 1989 is now the question I'm posing to you. In 1989 is when the Berlin Wall fell and Russia's experiment with communism started to collapse. So the other major communist country on planet Earth, Russia, had failed at communism. It was now evident to everybody, and the whole system was imploding. That's one reason why a lot of Chinese people were thinking, hey, maybe that's going to happen here too. But then something else happened in a very bizarre twist of fate. What else happened that started this rally? Maybe it's too trivial of a question, so I'll couch it a little in easier terms. Somebody visited Deng Xiaoping. Somebody actually came to Beijing and visited with the Chinese leadership. And that person was not Nixon. Good call, though. Not Reagan. Better call. Oh, I don't think Reagan ever left the country. All right. Jimmy Carter? Nope. Already out of office. Bush. Ford? No, he would have fallen off the plane. Right? He wasn't an American. I heard it. Mikhail Gorbachev. Write that down in your notes. Mikhail Gorbachev, the guy who was in charge of the Soviet Union as it was imploding, came and visited with the Chinese leadership. And this was misinterpreted by these students and others as some sort of sign or symbol that the Chinese leadership was talking with the Russian leadership on how they should change as well. Does that make sense? So it was just a total coincidence. Russia was collapsing, and Mikhail Gorbachev just happened to come to China to talk about business. And people said, oh, that means China's government's going to collapse too, and they're asking him for advice. And that was not the case. And the Chinese leadership made sure everybody understood, no. We're not collapsing, and we're not talking about democratic reform. So go home by force if necessary. And that's what happened. Right? Everybody hip to that? The reason I'm talking about this in a little bit of detail is I think this is kind of the last big negative event of Chinese history in their period of humiliation. I already said the period of humiliation was over in 1949. But 1989 is kind of the last time China got really bad press. It was the last kind of little stumble on their way to the top. Because this was really embarrassing for the Chinese government. To be seen on the world TV and world public stage as repressing their own citizens and beating them down with water cannons and killing some of them. This was very embarrassing. And the Chinese government does not like embarrassment. Don't like it. And so I'm suggesting that even though the Communist Party is still in charge, it's a Communist Party that's much more receptive to the demands of their people, perhaps even a little bit more open to change, but slowly. And they don't want to be embarrassed on the world stage again, and they haven't been since. Does that make sense? Let me also throw in one other thing that you should definitely put in your notes and star about the Chinese government. They don't like to be embarrassed. You already wrote that down now. Here's the thing they really don't like. Of all things on the planet, the Chinese government abhors disorder. Do not like disorder. They do not like chaos. They do not like unpredictability. Thus, you could say the number one priority of China's government is stability. I'll say it again. The number one priority of the Chinese government is stability. That's why they don't like protests. They don't like change, not fast. They don't like knowing what's not going to be around the corner. They don't like to see things agitated. They don't like to see their people agitated. And so you might think, well, they can just repress it by force because they're communists. That's true, they could. But see what happened in Tiananmen Square. They don't like embarrassment either. Okay, so the Chinese government is exceptionally keen on keeping things cool. Even their economy, by the way. You might have heard in the last couple years, one of the things the Chinese government has focused a lot on is actually cooling down their economy. Their economy's been growing too fast. It's been growing too fast. They're getting too rich too fast. What the hell? Why is that a problem? Anybody tell me? Why is that a problem? Wouldn't we love to have that problem, by the way? Woo! Yeah, you don't want inflation. You don't want too much money, too much growth, too much instability, because when you have prices going up and people demanding things and too much growth, too many buildings going up, we're talking about instability again. We don't, it's too fast. Cool it down, cool it down, cool it down. Nice, predictable, stable growth. That's what they want. Make sense? Thumbs up it? Somebody thumbs up the Chinese economy for me. Thank you. That's what's going on right now. Stability overall. And I know I'm jumping ahead maybe to the last slide already, but do note this. I don't think the Chinese government's stupid. In fact, I know they're not. And so as more and more Chinese people get richer and richer, they're going to demand more things of their government. They already are. As people get richer, Chinese people are saying, well, being rich is nice, but our air quality sucks. What's the point of being rich if my kid can't breathe? What's the point of being rich if we don't have roads we can drive on? What's the point of being rich if the government can come bash our door down and take everything we have at any given second for any reason they want and we have no legal recourse? People are starting to ask those questions. And the Chinese government is savvy. I think they're already behind the closed door saying, look, here, we know we're changing. People are going to demand more of us. People are going to demand more of their government. Maybe they're going to ask for some sort of democracy. We're not going to have, it's not going to happen overnight. We're not going to have no damn revolution here, but we're going to slowly and stably talk about change. Slowly. Take your time. Let's not rush into things. That's the Chinese government motto. So I think change is coming, but slowly. Might they end up a democracy someday? Maybe, but slowly. There's not going to be any big uprisings. There's not going to be any French Revolution, because China's government will put that down, because that's too unstable. Slow change is what you're likely to see. Well, let's get to that change now, because what we've seen since Tiananmen Square is nothing short of an absolute miracle. Nothing short of an economic miracle on the world stage. The entire era of the 1990s, probably right up to present day, we'd say massive economic growth, due mainly to the economic liberalization we've talked about. Let people make as many bricks as they want. Let people own their own business. Let businesses export to other countries. The more economic freedom the Chinese people have gotten, the more damn money they make. And there's 1.5 billion of them trying to make a shit ton of money. I know this sounds goofy to say, but of all the peoples I've ever met on planet Earth, the most similar peoples are American peoples and Chinese peoples. Because if you go talk to the average Chinese person right now and be like, what do you want out of life? Get rich, make money, get a better job, better house, better car, hot wife or husband. I want to be sexist. Yeah, I want it all, right? And they're working hard to get it. Hey, doesn't that sound like America? Now, if you go to Europe, they'd be like, well, social good. Oh, we don't want none of that shit in America or China, all right? We want stuff. We want to grow. We want to express ourselves the way we want to economically and have choices and do all this stuff and get rich. That's what's really driving the engine on a one-to-one individual basis in China. And that's kind of like America. America, I'd say. Okay? So economic liberalization and, add to this, massive foreign investment. Remember, during the Communist Revolution in China, they closed off their system. They didn't want to trade with anybody. The foreigners are the ones that got them in all that trouble, if you remember back to that part of the lecture. So they said, we're going to reassume control of our economy, period, and we don't want any foreign intervention. We don't want no foreign money. We don't want no foreign presence. Get the hell out. But that changed after Deng's reforms. And it wasn't overnight, but by the late 80s and 1990s, China's government was saying, okay, GM, do you want to invest in our country? Okay, GE, IBM, you guys want a piece of the action over here? Sure. Bring your billions and billions of dollars. Nike, you can come too. We got sweatshops for you, all right? And massive international investment did roll in, but please put this in your notes as well. There were stipulations attached. So mostly American or Western companies, I should say. Mostly Western companies go into a place, I would say someplace in Africa, and say, hey, we're going to set up a sweatshop. You're going to make some Nike shoes down here. All right, here's the deal. We're going to build a factory. You're going to give us a tax break. We're going to dump pollutants in your river. We don't give a shit. We'll pay your people a nickel an hour. It's all good. We'll give some taxes to the government. And that's that. Well, when Nike or anybody else tried to play that in China, China just laughed and said, okay, hold on. You're giving us demands. You're giving us demands. No. This is China. This is old school China again. Let's go back in time 300 years. You will trade on our terms. You want to start a factory here? We will tell you how that factory will be run. And I don't mean the day-to-day and how you actually make the shoes. I'm saying the Chinese government would do this. Hey, IBM, you want to come in? Great. Here's the deal. Do anything you want. You will get taxed, but at a lower rate. You will pay our people a decent wage, but we're not even going to ask a lot there either, but write this down. You will share with us all the technologies that you're bringing here. You will share technology. You will let us see what's going on in this factory. You will help us become innovative. And that has happened time and time and time again with every single company. Now, if you were a company, would you agree to those terms? If you were IBM, would you oh, well, we have to give them all, not all our trade secrets, but we have to share a bunch of our secrets with China. Would you do it? Many of you are saying no. Who would say yes? Hell yeah, I'll do it. Why would you do it? Think about 1.5 potential Chinese consumers. And then think again whether you're going to be willing to share your technology with the Chinese government. Think hard. Because these companies did, and they came up with, yeah, we'll do that. Fair dinkum, fair trade. We want access into the Chinese market, maybe to produce cheaper sweatshop-made Nike shoes, but mostly to get access to the consumer base. It was a calculated risk, and every single Western company took it. GM would be like, well, shit, we don't want to give them our certain technologies, but if we don't go in there, another car company will. So we might as well. So China, the end result of this bullet point here is China gained a lot from allowing investment and not just dollar bills, y'all. That's what I want you to know. They weren't just making shit for Walmart. They were making shit for Walmart and then figuring out the technologies to make it themselves without Nike and without IBM and without GM. Again, that's part of their economic miracle. Poor countries stay poor when they just make shit for other people and never make it for themselves. Does that make sense? You can start a sweatshop in, Angola and make 1 billion Nike shoes, but Nike's going to make all the money. But if you pirate all the technology for Nike shoes and start making your own Angola brand, now you're making money for your country. And that is exactly what China's done. By the way, a lot of your senators, maybe even some of your presidents, think this is evil. Oh, this is terrible. China ripped us off. But it's like, nobody held a gun to any of these companies' heads. They all want the dollar bills, and so it was fair trade by them. So every government wants to do as best it can for its own people, and China's government has done exceptionally well at that for the last 20 years. Sorry to go off on a huge rant about the Chinese government, but let's get through the rest of this when we get to Russia. So you had this 1990s up to the 2000s economic explosion, and yes, it was double-digit growth. Double-digit growth. Maybe you haven't studied economics enough, because I haven't, to really understand what that means. But when we're talking about growth, they measure that in terms of GDP, how much bigger your GDP is getting every year. So if our economy is worth $1 trillion, $1 trillion, and the United States right now has like a 2% growth rate, That means you take 1 trillion, multiply it by 2%, and then add that on. And that's how big we're going to be next year. Does that make sense? And if we're at 3% growth the year after that, you take that money, that amount, multiply it by 3%, and add that on. And that's how big we are the year after that. In China, it's been double freaking digit. 11, 12, 14% growth. Means your economy, your GDP grew by 14% in 1 calendar year. Again and again and again and again for 20 years. Now are you starting to see the excitement about China's economy? And why all these companies are like, yes, let us in. Oh my God, we got to get a part of that action. And it's not over, by the way. I mean, all these companies who ain't in China, they still want into China. It's still an exceptionally hot market. And to go back to the thing I said about the Chinese government trying to slow it down, that growth rate is phenomenal. It's unheard of, especially for that long of a period. I think China was up for a Nobel Peace Prize at one point because in one decade, in the last decade, or actually the decade of the 1990s, it has been stated something to this effect. China raised 250 million people above the poverty line from 1990 to the year 2000. 250 million people, 250 million people that in 1990 were declared impoverished by UN standards. 10 years later, 250 million of them are above the poverty line. That's crazy. Crazy insane. China's been growing a middle class consistently, diligently, and that's why it's vibrant and most Chinese people are happy as hell. Start to make a little more sense now? Go China? Yeah, yeah. Rah, rah. All right. Double-digit growth. And again, to go back to what I was saying, the Chinese government's been like, whoa, that's actually too hot to handle. We can't control that. People are doing too much. And inflation happens when too many people get too rich and everybody starts buying more shit. So when you're poor, you eat rice because rice is cheap. You get a little bit more money. Well, I'll ask you, you're college students. How many people have eaten ramen noodles because you didn't have the money to eat anything else? Ramen noodles, okay. About a quarter of you had to resort to ramen. But if you had a little bit more money, what might you buy at the grocery store? More ramen, someone says. Okay, let's max you out on ramen. Then what do you buy? If you got a little bit more money, what do you buy? Someone's jumping. Someone says cheese. Okay, that's a good logical jump. Ramen, cheese. If you had a little bit more money, then you'd buy eggs. Someone's beer, steak. Yeah. How many people? If you had like $200 to blow, what would you buy at the grocery store? Drugs? They don't have drugs at the grocery store. I think you see my point, all right? You start to buy more expensive shit that you've never had. We wouldn't consider food as a luxury item, but you'll buy more expensive food that you never had before, let's pretend it's steak. If everybody in China suddenly had the money to buy a steak, a bunch of them will. And all of a sudden, whoa, steak's a hot commodity. Everybody's buying steak. What happens to the price of steak? Boom, it goes way up. If 1 billion people are all trying to buy it, trust me, the price goes up fast. And so if enough people get enough money too fast, they all start buying shit, and what happens to prices in the entire country? They all start to inflate. Thus the word inflation. So the Chinese government's been saying, whoa, 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 inflation, destabilizing, we don't dig it, slow down the growth, everybody chill. We're all going to get rich, but let's slow it down. Cool? Okay. So 1990s, massive economic surge, been continuing to this day, and now I can go through these bullet points pretty quickly because you're starting to see China start racking up successes in a very big way pretty much since you've been born. Pretty much since you've been born, China's been putting them in the win column because most of you have been born after 1989, correct? Correct? Good. So your whole life, China's been winning and winning and winning and winning. 1999, Hong Kong reverts back to China. The British pack up their shit and nobody even waves to each other. The Chinese just say, get the hell out, goodbye, and good riddance. 1999, the same year, Macau returns to China from the Portuguese. It gets even better, though. In the year 2000, the U.S. established most favored nation status, trading status with China. Yes, we want to trade with you. You don't think about this, but this is the point at which Walmart shelves started to get flooded with cheap Chinese goods. And now they're all cheap Chinese goods in Walmart and many other stores just like Walmart. In the year 2001, China enters the World Trade Organization. Now they're trading more and more with everybody on planet Earth through the WTO and the connections therein. Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry, good call. Please fix that in your notes. 1997, Hong Kong reverts. 99 is Macau. Does that sound right? Okay. I won't really test you on that exact date, but we don't want to misinform. So 97 is when Hong Kong goes back to China. 99, Macau goes back. It's more about them getting their territories back than the dates itself. And let's see, economy set sizzling pace. This is a story from like 5 or 10 years ago. 9.5% growth for 15 months. That is crazy. Crazy. I assure you, and I know I've said this horrifically terrible thing in class before, but American politicians and economists would donate a testicle to have a 9.5 economic growth rate in this country. Maybe both testicles. That's just unheard of, that level of growth for a country this big, because the United States will likely never achieve that growth rate again. Not because we suck, but it feels like a test question. How come the United States can likely never achieve a 10% economic growth rate again? Too much debt? But let's pretend we have no debt. It's actually a real easy mathematical reason. What's that? GDP stabilizes, yes. Here's why. We're too damn big. We're too damn big. Think about what it would take to increase our $13 trillion economy by 10%. That's a big damn number. It's a big damn number. Once China gets as big as we are, they're not going to have 10% growth rate. But they do right now on their path to becoming a $13 trillion economy. So it's simply a matter of size. The U.S. is still pretty vibrant, but we're so freaking huge. It takes so many more trillions of dollars to make a 10% impact on us. Does that make sense? I don't want anybody thinking that the U.S. just sucks and we're all just hanging out, stagnant. But a very good year, and this feels like a test question too, a very good year, in fact, maybe a great year for the U.S. would be an economic growth rate between 4 and 5%. If you did 4 and 5%, whoo, you're banging. All right? Whoo, the U.S. is smoking 4 or 5%. China's been double that for 20 years on their path to get as rich as us. If I haven't said it before, I'll go ahead and say it now. China will be the largest economy on earth in your lifetime. Have I said that already? Every year they bump the forecast up a little bit. 5 years ago, they say China will be the biggest economy by 2050. 3 years ago, they said China will be the biggest economy by 2030. Last year, they said China will be the biggest economy by 2020. And now I've heard possibly 2017. It's happening that fast. So when you have growth rates like 10%, yep, you can do the math. You're talking exponential growth pretty quick. All right? And as I've suggested, we're not just talking about making cheap shit for Walmart anymore either. China has invested heavily in R&D, heavily in technologies, heavily into making their own cars, their own solar panels, their own computers. Hell, they have their own internet and their own Facebook. China likes to make it all themselves. And good on them, is what I say. That's one of the reasons why they're getting so damn rich. To say it again, what I said 10 minutes ago, if you just keep making stuff for foreigners, you'll stay pretty poor your whole life. You start making it for yourselves, now you're an economic growth engine. Okay? And you may have heard horror stories about even R&D centers from the United States relocating to China. You don't relocate to China to do R&D, do you? You just go there to make cheap Nike shoes. Not anymore. Not anymore. Right? Okay. To finish off our list of folks you should know, we already know these guys. You know who is who and when to say when. And they are getting ready to leave office. Definitely a test question as well. I believe they have less than a year left. Since they don't have elections in communist China, Communist Party China, I should say, they just have a council get-together, and the top Communist Council decides who's next. We know who's next, correct? Who's next? Who's the next president? Xi is going to be the next president. It's pretty predetermined. They'll have a finalization of this sometime in the next 6 months, I think. And I think, don't quote me on this, but I think the transition is supposed to take place in early summer 2013. But I'm not swearing on that either. I just want you to know that Hu and Wen will be gone in the next year. They've had a solid decade run. They will go down as legends in Chinese history because they have overseen a 10-year insane run for China. Just win, 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 get rich, win, win, richer, win, win, win. Everything these guys have touched has been gold. It's not because they're that great, it's they were in the right place at the right time. Talk about a good omen. Hu and Wen are legendary in their own right. Here's a couple things I want you to know about them, even though they're on their way out. What they did so successfully was Hu and Wen have been the Chinese leaders that really brought China to the world. Write that down. Hu and Wen are the Chinese leaders that really brought China out into the world. Deng was a great leader, and the leaders after him were great leaders, but it wasn't until pretty much the last decade that these guys said, hey, China's a big boy now, and we're super rich, and we're going to start taking our place in the world stage. And so these two leaders, they have visited probably every country on earth, most of them multiple times. Most countries on earth multiple times in their decade run. Before you think, oh, well, all leaders do that. No, they don't. How many countries did George Bush visit while he was in office for 8 years? This is one of these quotes that I do remember, or not quote, but facts, that I kind of want you to write down, even though it's trivial. George Bush, former president of the United States. Got it? 8 years. 8 years. Does anybody know how many times he went to Latin America? Once. I wonder how many times Hu and Wen went to Latin America that same 8 years. Probably like a dozen or two. These guys have been working it. Working it. And working it, I see your hand, working it mostly for diplomacy, but mostly with an eye for trade. Mostly for an eye for trade. China ain't in no wars. China don't need to kiss no ass to help people get into a war or to help get out of a war or any other kind of diplomatic unniceties. When they're out and about in the world, they're talking money, man. They're talking trade. How can we do more? Hey, let's lend you some money. We're a good Samaritan. We'll help you build your infrastructure. You help us build factories. You buy our stuff, we'll buy your stuff. That's what these guys have been doing, and doing it well. Well. I know I sound like I have some sort of love affair with Hu and Wen. It's not. Putin's my number one, all right? But these guys have been extremely savvy leaders. Extremely savvy. Love them or hate them, they've been very good leaders for China. And the test question I wanted to give you for it was, Hu, of course, is the head man, so he does mostly diplomacy and kind of big deals. Wen is the one that's been going around with an eye for resource acquisition. Jot that down. Resource acquisition. Wen is the one that's been to every country on earth, probably 10 times, saying, hey, you guys have steel? We'd like to buy your steel. You guys have coal? We'd like to buy your coal. And your rubber, and your bauxite, and your iron ore, and your magnesium, and what other cheap goods? Oh, and Brazil will take all the soybeans you want to sell us. Why would China be buying so much stuff? Because they are the economic engine of the planet now. They need to feed 1.5 billion people and all of the factories that crank out all of these goods that you're buying off Walmart shelves. All right? So they have intentionally gone out and said, we need to get stuff from all over the planet, and we'll set up sweet trade deals while we're here. I did not mean to ignore your hand so long, sir. What can I do for you? I always get confused by Wen's position. Because he's not the vice president. Technically, Xi Jinping is the vice president, which I think is much like the U.S. vice president, which is to say they do nothing, all right? I think the vice president of China is as meaningless as the vice president of the U.S. They only would do something if the president died. Wen is really kind of like, he's called a premier. Sometimes he's called the premier, which there's no equivalent in American system. It would be something like the Secretary of State combined with the vice president, combined with maybe Secretary of Commerce. It's a very unique position. He definitely has a business angle, and he does a lot of domestic affairs. So if there's like an earthquake or hurricane in China, Wen will be down there in a hot shit minute. If he's abroad somewhere, he's talking business. So I don't know that there's a single position in the United States that has that exact description. Does that make sense? Which I know it seems like perhaps a trivial test question too, but I do want you to know one of the reasons why these guys are beloved in China, and my Chinese friends can tell me otherwise, is that, again, they've been very receptive to the Chinese people's wants. They're not giving them democracy or nothing. But when an earthquake happens, those two guys are on the scene literally within hours. Hours! They'll be down there saying, yep, government's going to help you, government's going to help you. Let's get some bulldozers in here, let's get the National Guard, yep, let's do this shit, all right? They are Johnny on the spot for any domestic disturbance or natural disaster. Again, trying to be attentive to Chinese public's needs. And if there's a scandal, these guys sometimes cover it up, but oftentimes they'll come up. Wen Jiabao is actually really popular because when scandals happen, for some reason he's been the one that kind of exposes them and says, oh, by the way, yes, the government repressed this information for a while, but yeah, we actually had all this poison baby formula that killed a bunch of babies. Sorry about that. And let's see if we can fix that. And maybe we need to have stronger regulations on formula production. I believe, and again, my friends can tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure Wen Jiabao has a Facebook page and it has like 400 million followers. Or either that or it's fake, because he had a Facebook page, the Chinese equivalent of Facebook page, and he's one of the most popular people on Facebook history, period, ever. Which happens if your country has 1.5 billion people, I suppose. All right? He's in a scandal right this second because a bunch of his relatives stole a bunch of money or are corrupt, but they're all going to walk out of office with pretty spotless records. Okay? Got it? All right. Sorry to belabor the point, but of course here is the next leader of China, Xi Jinping, unless something radical happens. I mean, we can't say 100% sure, but all indicators are that Xi Jinping will be the guy in charge this time next year. And I think finally, our thing 6 for China, China has/will resume its rightful place as a major leader of Asia and a world power. Yes? It's simply a matter of cycling them out. It's not like a monarchy. Oh, it is in the Constitution. Okay. So what's the term? What's the term length? There you go. Now we know, and it's a test question. I love crowdsourcing. So the Chinese leadership has 5-year terms with 2 maximum 10-year run. Okay? Again, it's funny for us here in the West to say that because that would suggest they're elected somehow or that there's some choice in the matter. And there isn't for the public, but there is for the Communist Party. So I suppose 5 years ago, the Communist Party got together and said, do we want to keep these guys? Is that what happened, essentially? And really, that meeting would have been short because 5 years ago, these guys were doing so great. It was like, yeah, they're there for another 5 years. That's fine. So decade run for Chinese leaders. 5 years, if they, I guess it's possible they could suck bad enough to get thrown out, but pretty much a 10-year lock-in, and then the Communist Party gets together and decides whose turn it is next. And again, that makes sense. This isn't a monarchy. It's not for life. You do want to rotate people through and have fresh blood, and you don't want people just to grow old and die there. Yeah?
Let me take you back 1976 when China decided to privatize its industry.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that the reason they decided to change their foreign policy from goodwilling to mutual credit?
Yes, absolutely. And Deng Xiaoping was responsible for that too. His question was, didn't they roughly change their foreign policy about trade in 1976? Absolutely. I mean, there would be no point to trying to create a manufacturing powerhouse unless you have somebody to export all the shit to. So that was intentionally what part of their platform, their economic reform was, let's make a whole bunch of stuff that the world will buy from us, and that's how we'll make money. And again, put this in your brain if you're not tying these 2 and 2 together here and getting 4. Deng said, that's what we've been doing for 3,000 freaking years. Go back to the history lesson I gave you 2 lectures ago. That's what China's always done. They've always produced stuff that the world wants, and the world comes to their door and buys it for cash money. Remember that part of the lecture? And they're just returning to what had always worked for them to begin with, which I find it comical in today's world, obviously, of making fun of our own government. I find it entirely comical when we have these senators and Congress people and yahoos who are like, we should ban trading with China. They're unfair trading practices. We have a trade deficit with China. No shit, Sherlock. Go pick up a history book. You and the British and the Mongols and everybody else for the last 3,000 years, dude. Chill out. I'm not making fun of any political party. I've heard hacks from both sides say stuff like that. China's not open enough. We buy all their stuff. They don't buy ours. Uh-huh. That's what the British thought 200 years ago, too. They started selling them crack. Why don't we try that? I'm not suggesting that. But, yeah, this is not new. This is not new. This is China back in its fine form, okay? So China has/will resume its rightful place. You know what? It's time. It's time. It's time to erase the will. China has returned. It is back. I'm tired of reading this bullshit in journals and foreign policy magazines about China's rising. Ooh, China's developing. Ooh, China may be a world power someday. Really? What the hell else are we waiting for to just admit they're here, baby? They're back. They're a world power. How much more money could they make? How much more of the world's economy could they control? How much more of our debt could they own before it makes them a world power? So I think they're there. And they're increasingly stepping up politically in the world too. Maybe that's what folks are still waiting for. But I say China is a world power and a major leader of Asia and the world, because here to finish this off, now we get to some fun stuff. China's just not been making money. They've been pushing their society towards technological innovation, which is just as important. Money's fine, but once you develop fully, now you're in the catbird seat. So in 2003, China had its first man in spacewalk with its own equipment done entirely by itself with a Chinese person. Not many countries have pulled that one off. Not many at all. In 2008, they hosted the Olympic, and they won them. They won it all. Won the gold. Simply hosting the Olympics is something that big boy countries do. You've got to have serious amounts of money, serious amounts of time, and serious amounts of pride to want to host the Olympics. And then if you win them on top of that, icing on the cake. Virtually all historians and writers of our time are now saying, and you can jot this down, possible exam question, that the 2008 Olympics was China's coming out party. I never liked it phrased like that because it sounds kind of, gay, all right? So I've never, coming out, but that's the way I've seen it written in hundreds of articles. It's their coming out party. Well, China's not gay, all right? What they're saying is that the 2008 Olympics was when who and when, and 1.5 billion Chinese people came out to the world and said, we're here. We're here. We are a world power. We are significant. We're not just rich. We're not just big. We have technological prowess. We have national pride. We have all these things going on that big boy countries do. In fact, we're now starting to lead the way for a lot of this. It was their kind of coming out party. Make sense? Because they also, in the same year, although not many people followed that, did a space walk. And even fewer countries have done that. So they put a Chinese man in space, and he went around in a little tin can for a while and came back. Then about 3 months after the Olympics, they put a man in a tin can, put him up, and he went outside of the vehicle and then came back to Earth. This is a significant accomplishment. By the way, I'm not just a space geek, okay? It's not that I'm all geeky about space stuff. But what countries do things like this? See, that's the bigger point. What countries put a man in space? Rich, I hear, badass is actually a better answer. Badass is a better answer. There's lots of rich countries. Has Japan put a man in space? They're rich as hell. How come they haven't done it? Brazil's pretty rich. They put a man in space. Israel's rich. Turkey's rich. Europe as a whole is rich. The Brits are rich. The Germans rich. Has anybody seen the Germans in space? I haven't, not yet, although there'll be a funny musical. The Germans in Space, all right? Countries that do this shit are countries thinking big. Not just about the money. They're thinking big. They're thinking leadership role. They're thinking inventing the future. Oh, wait a minute, that in Virginia Tech, all right? Inventing the future. The big boy countries do the big things. You got to have the money, the resources, but more importantly, you have to have the vision and the pride to have a space freaking program. And guess what? They're not finished there. They entered the BRIC in 2008, the same time, the BRIC, and Taiwan ties are warming up. They now are the biggest holders of U.S. debt. Essentially, the Chinese are propping up the whole world debt market. Do you think we're going to bomb China anytime soon, by the way? Yeah. If you're going to bomb China, you might as well drop bombs on your own banks, because they own so much foreign currency. To destroy them would be to destroy yourself. And now China on the world stage. Let's just go ahead and finish this off. They're back. They have their space program, the Olympics. They have their own car manufacturing sector now that's on fire. They have a bunch of people who are getting really rich, who want more goods and more services, and who eventually may demand more rights and more voice in their government, but that's for the future. But this place is on fire. These are actually old slides. They won the Olympics. I do like this slide, even though it's old, from 5 years ago at a major summit called APEC. Probably read about it in the book. Everybody wanted to meet with Hu Jintao. George Bush actually went and didn't have anybody to talk to. It was sad. I know. Tear. All right? But that's a sign of our times, that the U.S. leader would go to an international forum and be twiddling his thumbs while people were lining up to talk to Hu Jintao. That's a sign of the change that's been going on. Again, not that the U.S. sucks, but the shift has happened. The action's over there, and people want a part of that action. I say with no hesitancy, China has said for decades they will put a Chinese man on the moon. Period. Their original timetable is 2020. They appear to be ahead of schedule. Ahead of schedule. The next human that sets foot on the moon with no reservations, take it to the bank, you heard it here first, will be a Chinese dude. Or a Chinese lady, that'd be even more funny. But it's going to be a Chinese person, one way or the other. The Chinese are already in a joint operation with Russia to also take people where? To Mars. To Mars. They've already had that stuff in the works for a decade as well. I have no hesitancy in saying the Chinese are definitely going to go to the moon. And they have already speculated, it's been leaked, that whether we're going to go to the moon to say we did it, because we're badass, but we're also probably going to go ahead and build some sort of moon base, perhaps a permanent moon base for human habitation, which is awesome, because the U.S. will then say, holy shit, we need a moon base, all right? We don't want one, but if they're going to have a moon base, we want a moon base. And then when we put our moon base up, we'll have somewhere to order takeout from. See what I'm talking about? That's all I'm saying, all right? Make no bones about it, as soon as the Chinese plans to make some sort of move to a permanent U.S. moon base, the United States will be hot on their heels like there's no tomorrow. We don't want a moon base now. We don't care about a moon base now. But if the Chinese have one, we got to have one too. We got to have one too. Because what if the Chinese have a moon base and then they put lasers on it and shit? And they put lasers on the moon, they shoot us from the moon with lasers, and we need lasers on the moon, so we got to get our asses up there with lasers. As stupid as that sounds, that's probably exactly how it's going to happen. Because the U.S. public doesn't really have a big appetite for spending $1 trillion on moon lasers, but the U.S. Defense Department can surely talk somebody into it. And I know only space geeks paid attention to this, but I did have to throw this out. Does anybody remember about a year and a half or 2 years ago, maybe it wasn't even that, the U.S. actually shot a missile to the moon? Does anybody remember this? You remember that? We just shot a missile to the moon for the hell of it and blew it up. Why do you think we did that? Because we're badass. Again, thank you. Yes, I think that came out shortly after a big Chinese press conference about their space program. And, what a coincidence, the Chinese say, hey, we're going to build a space a module on the moon, and then a week later, the U.S. blows something up on the moon. Just a total coincidence. Total coincidence. Not a coincidence. The U.S. is basically saying, sure, great, build a moon base. We can blow your asses up, bitches. All right, just so you know. Just so you know. Don't be thinking about no lasers and shit up there. The long and short of this is I get fired up about the space program, not because I'm a Star Wars fan, but more because this is the type of thing that pushes societies. I'm glad you enjoy that. Thank you. This is what pushes societies forward. This is the type of thing that pushes technologies forward. This type of thing. I know we'd all like to sit around and think, well, can't we just all be nice to each other and like each other and we'll work in labs and develop shit? That's nice. It never happens that way. There's always got to be a race. There's got to be a competition. If they get it first, we're all going to die. We must do this. And I'm sure there are people in the Pentagon who are saying, we better get our asses to the moon. China will kill us all right? I think that's preposterous, but I'm glad it's happening, all right? Yes?
NASA had a program called Project Orion, where they would go to the moon, build a base, and then from there go to Mars.
Yes, the U.S. is proposing to build a moon base from there to launch something to Mars because you wouldn't need as much fuel because of the lack of gravity. But has that been funded, the Orion project? It got canceled, yeah. Yes? You had all the technology, and then it got... Yeah, I think we've had a shift in the United States. This feels like maybe some sort of flash quiz question because nobody not in class will get this. But in my assessment, personal assessment, don't take this to the bank, don't quote me. My personal assessment is that the United States, the Department of Defense in general, has pretty much said, moon, space, Mars, drones. Yeah! That's been the shift. We're investing trillions in drones, which are cool too. Little death machines, they're fun. But China probably has shit tons of drone work as well. And this feels like a test question. What do you think China's got, speaking of defense or offense, what does China have more than probably anybody else? People, yes, got that. Thinking technology-wise. China got more hackers than anybody else. You can take that to the bank. Who knows how many millions of Chinese hackers are hanging out right now in some undisclosed warehouse outside the Gobi Desert, hacking the living shit out of everything on planet Earth. The Department of Defense, actually, I think it was Leon Panetta, the Secretary of Defense, came out just a few weeks ago and said, we are worried about Chinese hackers. We believe that they have an active program to pretty much break everything in the United States, and the Chinese government's like, that's ridiculous. Stop talking crazy. I added the ha-ha-ha part. But yeah, that's actually one of the major threats that the U.S. and other entities are saying now, that one of their major threats they consider, not Al-Qaeda, is Chinese hackers. So that's out there as well, for technology-wise. Okay? All right, so China maybe going to the moon, maybe going to Mars, et al. I do believe we are seeing a space race unfold. But here's the deal. This space race that's happening right now, and it has started, this space race is an Asian space race, for sure. This is an Asian affair, because Great Britain ain't there, nor are the Germans, or, unfortunately, America. What you do have going on is China facing off in the space race, not militarily, against Japan, which has said, yes, we're going to start doing more, and India, another country with the national pride with something to prove, although pretty far behind China, and some other Asian entities. Korea, don't count South Korea out. Those people want to have a robot in every home by 2020. Have I given that in class already? Did I tell you this in class? Test question then. China says we're going to have a man on the moon by 2020. South Korea came out several years ago and said, we're going to have a robot in every home by 2020. A robot in every Korean household by 2020. Those guys are kicking it with robotics. Yeah. Does that include a what? A Roomba? What the hell is that? Is that the little vacuum cleaner that goes around? That's cool. Those things are cool. It might include that. I don't know. What's that? Okay. Yeah. They're including a robot in all new apartments. The Rombot? It's called a Rombot? The vacuum cleaner robot is included in every Korean apartment building? That is awesome. Now if we can just get the Rombot into the space program on the moon with lasers. See? We're inventing the future here. Robots, moon, lasers. Unfortunately, the U.S. is not in this game. Not yet. Anything can happen, anything can change. And the closer that China and some of these other Asian powers get to truly being in space, perhaps on the moon, perhaps credible missions to Mars, my instinct is that great people like you all will pony up and get fired up and say, this is bullshit. We were the first freaking people on the moon. How could we not be in this race? And you're going to get fired up, and a bunch of engineers will make some kind of crazy, awesome laser bomb to kill everybody. And then we'll go to the moon, all right? Because that's what America does. Shortly after we kill everybody with lasers, we'll give them money to rebuild their moon base. Then we'll blow it up again. Then we'll go to Mars and do it all over again. Anyway, I'm getting too far afield. Let's finish. It may be a Cold War, but in space, which is funner, all right? Let's finish up with the big pluses. China, big pluses. It is a big place. It is the third or fourth biggest country on planet Earth. It is the biggest population on planet Earth. Although, side note, who will soon have the biggest population? India will soon have the biggest population, and that's fine by China, because China will soon have the biggest economy on planet Earth. There you go. Big economy, big military, by the way, and we've touched upon military things here today. Thanks so much for being a participatory part of this Halloween lecture. This has been great fun. This is what education is supposed to be all about, in my opinion. Having people throw in stuff they know and work on it. Their military is still nowhere near the size of the U.S., nowhere near the death-wielding capability. For anybody that's still scared, or you know people back in your hometown that are scared China's going to invade, isn't there a new movie called, a new remake of Red Dawn coming out? Who is it that's invading us in this Red Dawn? It is China, Korea? Beautiful. Playing on America's fears. I love it. So there's a movie coming out called Red Dawn that China's going to invade our country. Here's why that's preposterous. They may be going to the moon, and they may win the Olympics, but they ain't ready to play with that mound of fire ants, all right? Their military is growing, but it ain't great yet. They may have the equivalent of the F-35, but they ain't near America yet. And by that, I'm not making fun of China's military. I'm saying just look at the numbers. You can pick aircraft carriers, battleships, guns, missiles, planes, trains, automobiles. You can pick anything you want. The U.S. has an exponential amount of everything. Feels like a test question. Of everything except people. China does have the largest standing military on planet Earth. I'll repeat for all the sneezing. China has the largest standing army on planet Earth. That is, physical humans in boots with guns in their hand. That they have a shit ton of. Do we really care about that? Hell no. We got bombs to take care of all of them real quick, all right? We don't worry so much about physical human force anymore because we have technology which far, far surpasses the death-wielding capacity of humans with guns, okay? But I do want you to understand this. Why do you think China maintains such a gigantic standing army when most other rich countries are going away from that? This is a test question, food for thought. Why would China maintain it when the U.S. military force is probably going to get smaller? And here's maybe something to help you with this. Our countries are the same size. We'll roughly have the same technologies, but China will maintain its gigantic force of humans. We will not. Why? Yes? Someone says maybe something about their past where they got taken over. I like that. Anybody want to add to that? Yes? We don't need people. We have drones. Okay, but we're going to pretend that they have drones too. Yes? Intimidation, maybe? Could be a source of employment. Decent one. Anything else? Yes? Training, perhaps? What's that? Oh, now you're getting warmer. Now you're getting warmer. Maintain control. Now you're getting hot. Red hot now. Anything else? Stability. You're on fire now. Stability and geography. What? Geography? What's that got to do with anything? What's the geographic difference between China and the United States that has something to do with why China will maintain a giant ground force and we will not? U.S. has two big oceans keeping everybody away from us, and only Mexico and Canada to deal with. And they're our allies. Do we need a big force to repel invasion? No. How about China? China has fought wars with its neighbors. China actually has 14 different states bordering it. China is a big country, but it's a land empire that borders lots of other countries. China also has 1.5 billion people that may or may not, in some point in the future, have to be controlled. Now, do you understand why China has a shit-ton big army? Do you think that army would actually be employed to go invade another country? I mean, it's feasible, but doubtful. They maintain their big army because of their geography, because of what they consider credible threats to their empire, which are on the ground. China's not fighting any wars on the rest of the planet. They really don't need battleships. They don't need an aircraft carrier, although they just got one. They're mostly concerned with defending their territory, and it's a land territory with lots of borders with other entities. Is this making a little more sense? Are the light bulbs going off? And then whoever said all the other things about, yes, you also have a population of 1.5 billion people. Yeah, you kind of need a bigger force just in case. And not just to suppress them. I don't want to play, kind of an ultra-conservative Americans' wet fantasy of war that, oh, the Chinese government's a bunch of dictators and they crush their people. Not so much anymore. If you think about it, if 1.5 billion people wanted democracy, what do you think they'd get? Democracy. If 1.5 billion people all wanted a cheeseburger, what the hell do you think they'd get? They'll get a damn cheeseburger. It's 1.5 billion freaking people. Collectively, they can get whatever the hell they want. The government, I think, keeps a huge force, maybe to suppress democratic revolution, perhaps, but also for natural disasters. What happens if they do get into a war? What happens if a titanic earthquake happens? It is the military and the national reserves that go do that stuff. And you need a big force to go help, say, several 100 million people who are in an earthquake zone. It just takes a bigger contingent. We don't really need that in the U.S. Two different militaries. But their military is growing. China's military is growing, but it has a long way to go before they're spending even 10% of what the U.S. does on military. I'll say that again. They're not even spending 10% of what the U.S. does every year on military. U.S. Department of Defense budget is bigger than the next 10 countries put together, and that includes China. So Red Dawn will be a great movie, but it ain't happening anytime soon for all the reasons I just outlined. Yes, Wally? Oh, I have no idea about the effectiveness of Chinese military spending. Oh, yeah, ours is pretty bloated, but we still have tons of warships and battleships and planes and trains and missiles and nuke missiles and everything else. Yeah. Oh, so maybe we could have a laser that blows up the moon before China can get there just for spite. I can see that. I can see that. We should write that science fiction novel and send it to George Lucas, and he'll put Ewoks on it. It'll be a great movie, all right? Yeah. Yes, China is a nuclear power. Please don't forget, is that not up here? If it's not up here, it should be. China's a nuclear power. It's another reason we're not going to war with China. China's not likely to not be going to war with anybody else. Their arsenal, like everything else I've said, is like 1/10 of our arsenal, though. We really are an exponent of everything militarily compared to China right now. Right now. They're catching up fast, but for now, we're still an exponent of everything. Just pick it. We're an exponent ahead. Let me finish up with the other big pluses. Reassuming its place on the world stage, increasingly a choice option for other states. I do want to say 30 more seconds on that. For most of my lifetime, the United States has been kind of the sole superpower. And so we dictate a lot of what happens on the planet by what we want. And we cajole other countries to, hey, come along with us. We're on the right path. Many countries, for most of my life, have said, oh, I guess we got to. The U.S. is kind of in charge. That's simply not the case anymore. China is becoming a viable partner option for lots of countries around the planet. So instead of saying, oh, well, we're have to go it alone. If we don't agree with the U.S., they'll hate us and they won't trade with us and we're screwed. A lot of countries say, well, we don't like U.S. policy. We're going to trade with China. We don't like U.S. military policy. We're partnering with China. We don't like what the U.S. is trying to push through the United Nations. We're going to side with China. So we're moving towards this bipolar world where China now is effectively, politically, becoming kind of an equal to the United States, politically, on the world stage. Okay? They're a permanent Security Council member. You already know this. They're in the WTO, ASEAN, APEC. They're a BRIC country. They have that savvy-ass foreign policy I've already talked about with an eye for resource acquisition. And they have a growing middle class. Feels like another easy test question, too. Many comparisons are usually made between China and India. India, another great country, another big country with a big economy that's growing. India is way behind China. Way behind. And I love India too, okay? But if you look at nothing else, and this will be the test question, if you look at nothing else besides which one has a bigger middle class, China's winning that hands down. More people in China are being raised out of poverty and joining the middle class. That is not happening as fast in India. Not nearly as fast. Okay? So if you look at no other indicator but that, China's pretty far ahead in this game. Their middle class is growing. You can see this every day in the news, in pop culture. You can see it here on the campus of Virginia Tech. How many more students from China are coming to the United States to study? Why? Because they can. Because they can afford it. They're cosmopolitan. I do have to tell this little side note story that I found hilarious when I was in Singapore. I stayed in Singapore for about a week. I was going to in the airport, waiting to board my plane at like 5 o'clock in the morning, very early flight. I'd stayed up all night, of course, partying just to be up. So I'm sitting there with a hat pulled down over my eyes, like, ouch, it's 5 in the morning. When is this plane board? Damn it. The attendant, security guard, checking boarding passes going in, was this Punjabi guy. He had this awesome bright blue turban with a curled mustache. And I'm like, that's cool. Singapore is like really diverse. They have people from Asia, or everyone from Asia is in Singapore. There's no such thing as like Singapore locals. It's just Asians who hang out in Singapore. So I was looking at that guy, and I was like, this place is really cool. And 5 in the morning, I hear, la, 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 la. I hear some singing. Little kids singing in Chinese. And I'm like, what the hell is that? And I turned around. This is a true story. Katie would come on stage to verify because she was there. And there was like 30 little Chinese kids like this high, so I'm guessing they're like 10 years old, all holding hands, going through the airport, running through the airport, la, 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 la. And there'd be, for every 20 kids, there'd be an adult who was also holding hands. This huge human chain of like hundreds of Chinese kids. La, 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 la. Like, what the hell? And again, it's 5 in the morning. I'm like, am I delusional? What did I drink last night? And so then I was getting up to board the plane. These kids are still running around the airport. And I went up and I was like, to the dude, the Punjabi guy, I'm like, what the hell is that? And he said, oh, Chinese. You do not even know, sir. You do not even know. They're here all the time. Everybody comes here. They have so much money. They have so much money, sir. They have all the money in the world, sir. All they do is have so much money. They come here. That's a field trip. They have field trips here every week that people in Chinese kindergarten come here on field trips with hundreds of students all the time everywhere in Singapore. They have so much money. They have all the money. They're going to take over everything. I was like, whoa, I'm just trying to get on a plane, all right? And then I thought about it, and I realized that every place I'd been in Singapore had shit tons of Chinese tourists everywhere. Taking pictures, yelling it up, buying shit. And it occurred to me, wow, Chinese people have replaced American people as the world's biggest assholes. They have so much money that they will go out into the world and do what they want to with it. And I respect that. Because mostly, for the last 100 years, if you went someplace, people would be like, oh, American tourist. Oh, my God, these people come here with their money, and they just buy shit and do whatever they want, and take freaking pictures, and I hate those damn tourists. And it's Americans. Oh, those damn Americans. Now it's Chinese people. We have the weight lifted from our shoulders. China has surpassed us. That funny story, though, it is a reflection of our times. Oh, I'm sorry, we only have 1 minute left, so let me give you the negatives. Maybe that's one of the negatives, all right? Sorry for those of you that already put your notes away 1 minute early. But now that I've hyped up China as the greatest ever and richest and doing fantastic, they are. There is that sense of national pride that cannot be beat. Do jot these down real quick, because I do want to counter all this awesomeness that is China with some very big challenges. And that is, with world power they have now economically comes responsibility. China can no longer sit on the sidelines and watch people in Syria die. And they're being pressured to do something. The U.S. and others are saying, hey, big boy, you're a big boy now on the world stage. You have all this power. You can't keep burying your head in the sand and pretend like you're not going to do nothing. You have responsibility now. And that's true. There is still tremendous wealth disparity in China. I've told you now 250 million people got raised above the poverty line, but there's still 250 million people below the poverty line. It's a big population. And as the middle class gets richer and richer and richer, you do have a level of society that's getting poorer and poorer and poorer. And it's a lot of people. Okay? That's going to cause friction. There's been a massive rural to urban shift, and I know you guys want to leave, and leave if you have to, but I will make this a test question. This is perhaps the biggest movement of humans in modern history. Perhaps 200 to 300 million Chinese people have moved from the rural areas to the cities just in the last 2 decades. Maybe 500 million. It's hard to measure. But everybody's flooding to the Chinese coast and the big cities because that's where the action is, but that's very problematic. You got to deal with all those people and build buildings for them to live in and have jobs for them. There is massive environmental destruction, and this is actually tied with health issues. On its rise and its drive for riches and power and manufacturing and industrial sector and getting its mojo back and making people rich, that's all awesome, but it comes at a cost because they have ignored environmental issues. They've said, no, we're worried about getting rich, then we'll worry about pollution. We'll worry about getting people eating, then we'll worry about having toxic water. And quite frankly, the bill has come due. There are some nasty, nasty, nasty ass environmental destruction in China. Polluted water sources and huge dumps and toxic shit that they now have to deal with. They can't keep going like this because the health issues are starting to crop up, where the air in Beijing is now becoming unbreathable to people. And again, it's great to be rich, but if you can't live a good life, what the hell's money going to do for you? Besides, let you move somewhere else. And the political revolution imminent? I don't think so, but as people get richer, typically, they start to ask more questions and start to have more demands of their government. They don't just sit around and say, well, we're rich, so whatever, the government can steamroll us all they want. At some point, people say, I want a voice in what's going on here. I don't like this environmental pollution. I want stricter regulations on baby formula. I want something, and you're starting to see that happening at small scale in China. Little uprising here, little protest there, little one over here, and the Chinese government is going to have to deal with this, and it's not always going to be pretty. So China, big place, big pluses, but a lot of big minuses.